My mother convinced my boyfriend to marry my sister. She looked him straight in the eyes and said, "She's stronger and better for you." It was as if I were invisible, the weakest link in my own life. When I discovered the truth, something inside me shattered completely. I left Boston, my family, the memories, the fragments of who I had been, and started over from nothing. Years later, at a grand party I hosted in Seattle, my family walked through the doors smiling. But the moment they saw my husband, their expressions changed, and the story truly began. I grew up in a house that looked perfect from the street: white pillars, trimmed hedges, windows glowing warmly at night. Inside, however, everything felt staged, like we were performing a version of family life just for show. My mother, Linda, curated that illusion meticulously. Scarlett, my older sister, was the centerpiece. I was the quiet shadow in the corner. Scarlett didn't need to try. People made room for her automatically. Teachers adored her. Relatives complimented her. My mother built her entire life around her. "She just has presence," she'd say, brushing Scarlett's hair with a proud, theatrical smile. Then she'd glance at me, hair pulled back, jeans on, usually holding a book, and the smile would vanish. "Willow's smart," my father would offer, every week. "Yes, but people don't remember smart," my mother would reply. I pretended her words didn't stick, but they did. Everyone. I found refuge in screens and lines of code. Programming was fair. Mistakes were obvious, fixes rewarded. At home, nothing worked, no matter how hard I tried. Then Ethan appeared. I met him in a student workspace during my junior year. He laughed easily, spoke softly, and listened like what I said mattered. For someone who'd spent years minimizing her presence, he was sunlight after a long winter. He noticed things my family never did: the way I organized my notes, how I thought through problems, the quiet purpose in how I moved. When I introduced him to my family, my father shook his hand warmly. Scarlett smiled politely, but my mother's eyes flickered with a look I didn't understand. It wasn't interest in Ethan as a person, it was in what he represented: ambition, potential, a future that could be shaped. "It's nice to have someone steady," Linda said later, stirring her tea. "Maybe he'll pull you out of that tech cave you live in." It sounded like a compliment. It wasn't. At first, I ignored the signs: Scarlett dressing up more when Ethan visited, my mother pulling him aside to ask about his goals, his mentions of my sister in a tone that felt warmer than necessary. I wanted something in my life to go right. But deep down, I already sensed this family never let anything truly mine remain mine for long. I didn't realize the shift had begun until subtle changes became impossible to ignore. Maybe it was the late arrivals to study sessions with vague excuses. Maybe it was the constant glances at his phone when I entered the room. Or maybe it was the morning he praised my mother's cooking, as if he'd been eating at our house more than I knew. "Your mom makes incredible lemon chicken," he said casually. I froze. "You saw my parents this week?" He blinked, as if piecing it together. "Oh yeah, your mom invited me over. Just to talk." My mother had barely asked about my classes in months, but she had time to chat with him. The first ember of dread lit in my stomach. It grew when I found a receipt in his car. Gas from Boston, a place he claimed he hadn't been. The paper was warm from the sun, and every instinct screamed that something was wrong. When I confronted him, he smiled stiffly. "Your mom needed help with something. She said you were busy. Scarlett's been struggling. She could use support." Support. He said it like Scarlett was fragile glass, and I was a hammer. One weekend, I drove home unannounced, telling Ethan I had a project to finish in my dorm. I needed clarity, truth. At 9 p.m., I walked into my parents' house. Living room lights glowed. Voices carried, familiar, intimate. I froze in the hallway. Scarlett's laugh, Ethan's voice, my mother's low, pleased hum. Peeking around the corner, I saw them. Scarlett sitting close enough to brush against him. My mother perched like a queen, orchestrating everything. Ethan, caught between them, looked conflicted, unaware he'd agreed to a plan he didn't know existed. "She's stronger and better for you," my mother said smoothly. "Willow is distracted. She chooses work over people. Scarlett understands connection." Scarlett lowered her lashes, innocent. "I just want you to be happy, Ethan." My heart cracked quietly, cleanly. My mother continued, "Willow will build her career no matter what. Scarlett needs someone like you, someone successful, someone who fits. Fits." Like I was a puzzle piece she'd tried to sand down, but could never make fit. Ethan didn't argue. He didn't defend me. He didn't even notice I was standing there, watching my world bend sideways. The truth burned hotter than betrayal. I don't remember leaving the house. One moment I was staring at the scene my mother orchestrated. The next, I was gripping the steering wheel, numb, as Boston's night air pressed cold against the windows. I didn't return to campus. I drove until the city thinned, until highway lights blurred. At a rest stop, adrenaline evaporated and grief hit. Sharp, humiliating, complete. My mother hadn't just interfered. She'd replaced me. Ethan had done nothing but comply. I called the only person I trusted. Riley, I need help. She didn't ask why. I'm coming. Within hours, I was back at my dorm, packing a small bag while Riley watched. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. You need to get out of here. Not just this dorm, this whole orbit. She was right. 2 days later, I withdrew from my final semester. Professors were shocked. Advisors pushed me to reconsider. But the truth was simple. I couldn't breathe in Boston anymore. The betrayal didn't just break my heart, it shattered the illusion I'd clung to. That if I worked hard, stayed quiet, proved myself, my family would see me. They didn't. I packed what I could, sold what I couldn't, and left, moving across the country with one suitcase and no plan except escape. Seattle felt alien at first. The air smelled of rain and cedar. People didn't know my mother or Scarlett. They didn't know the girl trembling as she ordered coffee had just watched her life collapse. Riley's cousin let me stay in her tiny apartment for a few weeks. I remember lying awake on that first night, the unfamiliar sounds of Seattle outside the window, feeling both free and utterly unmoored. For the first time in years, I didn't have to navigate my family's expectations or my mother's careful manipulations. I could just exist without judgment, without comparison. The city, with its rain-soaked streets and towering evergreens, became a blank canvas. I found a small tech startup through a friend, a place where my skills mattered, and no one measured me against anyone else. The office was modest, but it welcomed curiosity and effort. For the first time, my work felt like mine, my ideas, my progress, my success. Slowly, a sense of confidence began to return. I made new friends who valued me for what I brought to the table, not for the image of someone else's daughter I was supposed to emulate. Then came the day I met Oliver. Unlike Ethan, Oliver didn't notice my past. He didn't see me as someone who had to be compared or corrected. He simply saw me. Our connection grew quietly, built on shared projects, conversations that stretched into the evening, and a trust that felt effortless. For once, I wasn't measured against another person's expectations. I was allowed to be fully myself. Years passed. I worked hard, built a life I could call my own, and eventually, I met the man who would become my husband. Strong, supportive, and entirely mine. When we married, we celebrated with friends and colleagues in Seattle, people who had witnessed my journey from that broken, betrayed girl to someone who had reclaimed her life. And then, the day came when my family unexpectedly showed up at a party I had organized. They walked in smiling, confident, certain that nothing had changed. Scarlett looked just as they always remembered, polished, composed, seemingly untouchable. But the moment their eyes fell on my husband, the smiles faltered. His calm, assured presence revealed the truth they hadn't anticipated. My life was no longer theirs to manipulate, no longer a stage they could control. Watching their reactions, I realized how far I had come. I had rebuilt myself from the ground up, not as a shadow, not as someone to be overlooked, but as a person who commanded her own space. I had taken the life that had been stolen from me and reshaped it into something real, something unbreakable. And in that moment, I understood that my past, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the silent witnessing of their favoritism, had not defined me. It had only made me stronger. From that night on, my family could no longer influence or control my life. Their expectations, judgments, and manipulations held no power over me. I had created a world that was entirely my own, a life built on my choices, my relationships, and my hard work. Every achievement, every moment of happiness belonged solely to me. Over time, I realized something important. The betrayal I endured didn't just teach me about deceit and manipulation. It taught me resilience, self-worth, and the value of boundaries. I learned to recognize who truly deserved a place in my life and who was there only to take. My parents' approval no longer mattered. My happiness did. And the love I found with someone who saw and valued me completely became a reflection of the person I had worked so hard to become. At that grand party in Seattle, watching Scarlett and my mother navigate the unfamiliar space of a life I had built without them, I felt a quiet satisfaction. Not vengeance, not malice, just clarity. I had survived. I had thrived. I had reclaimed what was always mine: my voice, my choices, and my life. And for the first time, I understood that no one could ever take that away from me again. I had left Boston, the family that betrayed me, and the girl I had once been behind. In Seattle, I had rebuilt not only my life, but also my sense of self. And in doing so, I discovered something far more valuable than their approval or recognition. I discovered my own strength, my own worth, and the life I was always capable of creating. I lay on the fold-out couch, hearing the refrigerator hum, feeling the weight of failure pressing into my chest. Pain is strange. It breaks you open in ways that create space for something new. On a quiet morning, after days of barely functioning, I stood at the window and watched the sun hit the lake. Something small and stubborn inside me whispered, "Get up." And I did. I found a therapist, Dr. Linden, who wouldn't accept my polite, "I'm fine." She pressed until the truth spilled out, raw and messy. "You weren't chosen," she said once, "because your family didn't want to see your worth. That's not your failure." I applied to finish my degree in Seattle and began building a new life, piece by piece: jobs, routines, friendships, stability. My world didn't rebuild quickly, but it rebuilt honestly. Over time, anger turned into clarity, clarity into strength, and strength into something close to peace. But peace didn't last. Years later, when my father sent a quiet text saying he wanted to visit, everything I'd left behind started drifting back. They arrived on a gray Seattle afternoon. My mother stepped out of the car as if she owned the driveway. Scarlett trailed behind, sunglasses too large for her face, and Ethan, hesitant, avoided looking at me. My father appeared last, thinner than I remembered, shoulders rounded less, eyes searching for mine. Michael stood beside me, steady and warm, a presence that made my mother flicker with uncertainty. She hadn't expected him. "Willow," she said with a practiced smile, "you've built quite the life." I stepped aside. "Come in." Inside our house, my house now, everything was intentional. My mother's eyes swept across the vaulted ceilings, the lake view, the clean lines, and warm wood tones. For the first time, I had home field advantage. We sat for dinner. My father was quiet. Scarlett glanced around, thinly veiled envy in her eyes. Ethan shrank every time Michael spoke. My mother narrated the room like a guided tour. Then Michael asked the question that cracked the surface. "When was the last time all of you were in the same room together?" "The engagement party, of course," my mother replied. My stomach tightened. Scarlett stiffened. Ethan nearly choked on his water. Michael nodded politely. "That must have been difficult for Willow." The room stilled. My mother's smile thinned. Scarlett finally spoke. "Mom, stop. We're not doing this. Not here." My mother snapped toward her. "Excuse me?" Scarlett's hands trembled slightly. "You need to hear this. Willow deserves the truth." Years of secrets spilled out. Scarlett looked at me, not the golden child, not perfect, just tired and human. My mother had not only spoken to Ethan, she had manipulated him, telling him I was distracted, that too ambitious, planning to leave, even drafting messages to make it look like they came from me. Tears filled my eyes as Scarlett explained. Michael squeezed my hand under the table, grounding me. Ethan, ashamed, finally looked up. "I trusted the wrong people. I should have fought for us." My father, silent until now, trembled. "Linda, is this true?" My mother exhaled sharply. "I protected my daughters. I did what any mother would do." "No," I said quietly. "You did what served your image, made Scarlett look better, kept me small." Scarlett wiped her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Willow. I really am. Mom told Ethan his career would be stronger with someone more polished, more useful for networking, like she was editing me out of the picture." Michael leaned forward. "What you did was abuse, emotional manipulation. You didn't just sabotage her relationship, you sabotaged her future to fit your narrative." My mother's voice trembled. "I won't be lectured in my daughter's home." "No," I said softly. "You won't. You'll listen." I looked at all of them, my parents, my sister, my ex, people who had once been the center of my life, and dismantled it piece by piece. "You cost me years. You cost me stability, my final semester, my confidence. You told me I wasn't worth choosing, but I built myself back without you." My mother scoffed, weak and defensive. "You left us," she said. "No," I replied. "You pushed me out." The room stayed frozen until my father spoke raw. "Willow, I am so sorry. I knew things were wrong. I didn't stop it. That's my failure, not yours." Michael stood walking to my side. His presence alone was a declaration. When they saw my husband, their faces turned pale, I said, "Not because of who he is, but because he represents the life I built without you, one you couldn't control." Scarlett whispered, "I'm done letting her control me. I want to make things right, if you'll let me." Ethan lowered his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Then they left. The door closed. Silence. Michael squeezed my hand. "You okay?" For the first time in years, I was. In the days after, the house felt quiet, like years of noise had drained away. My father stayed, and for the first time, we connected honestly. When he passed months later, I returned for the funeral. Scarlett had left Ethan, moved into her own place, and taken control of her life. My mother remained distant, polite in a brittle way, reduced to the perimeter of my life where she could no longer harm me. That boundary alone felt like victory. Back in Seattle, with Michael's hand in mine and a life built from my own strength, I realized something profound. I didn't win because they lost. I won because I healed. I stopped waiting to be chosen and started choosing myself. My mother's schemes didn't break me, they revealed me. And the life I have today proves it. If you've ever survived family betrayal or rebuilt from nothing, you're not alone. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming everything they said you couldn't be.